With our introduction to human creativity, we delve into the evolution of consciousness that the human ability to think and learn reflectively made possible. It is a journey that begins with the threshold to reflection, circa 100,000 years ago, and that will carry us to recent times. This is Session 12, Noogenesis, in a course titled Evolution of Consciousness, and that is central to a larger view, Evolution of Consciousness theory. In this session, we explore the advance of human understanding and human achievement that the power to reflect made possible, Noogenesis. Imagine we are at that moment 100,000 years ago, when the universe set forth to create meaning, at that instant when the first human being crossed the threshold to reflection. Who was that first reflective person? What might his or her life have been like? Soon others must have come to reflection. And the behavior they displayed, revealed through the archaeological record they left, began a journey that would carry us from huts and caverns, through the historic. Early in the reflective period, in what is now Italy, we ventured into a cave to hurtle clay pellets at a stalagmite that to this day resembles an animal. Elsewhere, we collected cave bear skulls, arranged them in cavern nooks, and put them in pits and stone chests. We also buried our dead. We laid to rest the bodies of our companions, placing food, animal remains, and flint tools at their sides. On their graves, we set stones, spread arca, and arranged flowers. Hunting and funeral rites reveal a new experience of existence. Long had the human species observed the migration of game, the passage of seasons, and the cycles of plant growth. Never had we asked what forces directed these movements, and never had we sought to appeal to these forces. Long had the human species known death. Never had we sought to relate death to the separation in our being. Our early reflective ancestors also sought to explain their world by what they observed. Rain makes the rivers rise. Snow drives the deer from the hills. Fire burns one's flesh and cooks one's food. The days, the moons, and the seasons pass with regularity. The world in which our ancestors lived behaved in characteristic ways. Increasingly, they discerned and sought to understand these ways. The period that immediately followed the threshold to reflection was a time when the most fundamental human ideas were in the formative stages. Our notion of a god or gods took shape, as did our notion of a soul and afterlife. We devised the earliest systems of spiritual belief and the earliest ways to predict and manipulate the behavior of our environment. We founded the rudiments of what would one day become organized science, religion, and engineering. Evidence of hunting and funeral rites dates to about 90,000 years ago in Neanderthal. If we take this evidence to be a marker, humankind crossed the threshold to reflection no later than that date. Subsequent to reflection, human anatomy refined in support of top-level consciousness. The face flattened. The chin became more prominent, and the brow became less distinct. The nervous system refined, and the brain shrank from its archaic to its modern proportions. By about 40,000 years ago, men, women, and children physically no different from ourselves inhabited the plains, forests, and mountains, anatomically modern human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens. Our anatomically modern ancestors carved figurines from stone and decorated spear shafts with geometric patterns. They wore fitted clothes and adorned their bodies with rings, bracelets, and necklaces made from ivory. The stone tools they manufactured not only demonstrated functionality, but an aesthetic quality, a display of artisanship beyond necessity, and that varied from region to region, and from toolmaker to toolmaker. Our ancestors also painted animals on cave walls. This form of expression dates back as far as 40,000 years, and has been found at sites throughout the world. Paintings in the caves at Lascaux, France depict deer, bear, horse, and other animals. One shows a dying hunter and a wounded bison, the first known dramatic narrative expressed in visual form. Our anatomically modern human ancestors lived in a world rich in gods and spirits, rites, and artistic expression. In this world, they experienced loneliness, uncertainty, and fulfillment. They nurtured sons and daughters, mourned the death of loved ones, and speculated on the passage into afterlife. They invented complex systems of belief and elaborate rituals and ceremonies. Through rites and prayers, they asked the gods they believed controlled their world for knowledge and a better life. By about 30,000 years ago, humankind had migrated through Indonesia to inhabit Australia, and, within the next 15,000 years, had migrated across the Bering Strait and along the banks of the northern ice floes to inhabit North and South America. By about 12,000 years ago, humankind moved away from the nomadic, hunting and gathering subsistence pattern it had inherited from its archaic ancestors and began to cluster in the first settlements, urbanization. To understand why we left the hunting and gathering way of life, recall our notion of collectivity. Greater individual autonomy and consciousness made it possible to form stronger social bonds. In response, social structure became less collective. Spurred by the growing complexity of our social interactions, we found it desirable, albeit essential, to live in permanent settlements. The move to urbanization was the result of a trend toward decollectivization traceable through human evolution, through life's evolution, and as far back as the formative stages of the universe's structural evolution. Traditionally, anthropologists believed that urbanization began in the nuclear area of Mesopotamia, or Fertile Triangle, the crescent that extends from the Nile Valley to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. From there, they believed that urbanization spread into the Indus Valley and China, into Europe, and across the Bering Strait into the Americas. Today, most scientists feel that urbanization arose independently at these locations. No matter the way in which urbanization spread, in an urban setting, we could more readily exchange ideas and stories, and pass them from generation to generation. The move to city life catalyzed the human endeavor to understand. If we were to imagine the Earth of 12,000 years ago, in terms of human creative activity, we would see it as a vast globe, most of which was dark. Yet, scattered in this darkness, bright spots would catch our eye. Such would denote areas of heightened reflection, the location of the first settlements. Urbanization had another outcome, one so significant that it touches our lives to this day. Prior to urbanization, human bands met their physical needs by hunting and gathering. As nomadic hunters and gatherers, bands occupied an ecological niche. As does the zebra herd or baboon troop, bands maintained a place in an ecosystem, and the ecosystem provided for their material needs. With urbanization, bands abandoned the ecological niche, enjoyed when living nomadically. Only a limited amount of game could be hunted, and fruits and tubers gathered, within a reasonable distance from the settlement. As a result, the early urban community experienced a chronic need for food and other goods. The early urban community experienced an intrinsic state of resource scarcity. Resource scarcity necessitated systems to encourage production and to regulate allocation, scarcity-based economics. Scarcity-based economics brought with it notions of market forces and central control. Agriculture emerged. Social structure became increasingly entwined with economic structure. Humankind took itself to be separate from the world around it, nature. Urbanization and scarcity brought into the human mindset a worldview centered on ideals of class, wealth, survival, property, competition, and man against himself and the natural world. When we think of the Earth, it is possible to speak of a lithosphere, or the layer of hard rock that makes up the Earth's crust. It is also possible to speak of a hydrosphere and of a biosphere, or the Earth's lakes and oceans and the layer of living things they support. We can also envision the Earth in terms of Teilhard's concept of the noosphere, or a layer composed of human thought and creativity, and the activities and artifacts brought into being by that thought and creativity. By about 6,000 years ago, the Middle East was dotted with towns and farms. From this nexus rose the most expansive of the world's early civilizations, Sumer. Writing emerged. Mathematics emerged. The cycles and thresholds, trial and error, and build-up and collapse of uncertainty that define humankind's ascent took place at an accelerated rate. Ancient Babylon rose. Ancient Egypt rose. The consciousness of a citizen living in Sumer, Babylon, or ancient Egypt encompassed a vast geographical area and the politics associated with an expansive social structure. If we were to imagine the Earth at this time, in terms of human creativity, we would no longer see it as a dark globe, dotted with an occasional bright spot. Many bright spots, in the New and Old worlds, would catch our eye, each denoting a concentration of human awareness. From these points, rays would emanate, linking one urban center to another, and marking humanity's inkling as to the scope of its Earth. Is the advent of hunting and funeral rites a reasonable marker for reflectivity? Does the emergence of human forms with more modern characteristics, prior to the earliest evidence of hunting and funeral rites, suggest that reflection emerged before the date of 100,000 years ago that we use for this event? With our look at the noosphere, we complete session 12 in our course titled Evolution of Consciousness. We have established the background to explore humankind's ascendance to the present and to understand the forces of evolution at work in today's world. Our course titled Evolution of Consciousness continues in session 13, Meaning.